Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So last week in our Parashat, we're talking about the trumpets that were used, and God says to Moses they should be used to call together the Edah and to direct the Machaneh. Right, so there's a question, what is the difference between an Edah and a Machaneh? Okay, and I quoted Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, who said that a Machaneh, which we usually translate as camp, bands together for protection against an external threat, while an Edah, which we usually translate as congregation, forms together in pursuit of shared ideals. Okay, and Soloveitchik spoke of two covenants, the Brit Goral, the covenant of fate, and the Brit Yehud, the covenant of destiny. And I'm not sure if he made this, I'm not far from an expert in the thought of Joseph Soloveitchik. I'm not sure if he made the connection, but it seems to me that somebody can be like a Jew who's uninvolved in Jewish life will be part of the Machaneh because they're part of the Brit Yehud, right? I mean, anti-Semites don't really care whether you're a practicing Jew or not, right? So you're part of the Brit Goral, but you're not part of the Brit Yehud. You don't shape the destiny of the Jewish people. And the word Edah appears prominently in the Parsha this week as well. Right? Moses sends the 12 spies to evaluate the land of Canaan, and they report that the land is bountiful and rich in resources, but that it will be impossible for the Israelites to conquer it because the inhabitants of the land are too strong. Right? So their report leads to the Israelites in the desert refusing to go up, and God gets angry and he asks Moses, how long must I put up with this evil congregation, this Edah Ra'ah? Okay, and as I pointed out last week, and I was discussing afterwards at Kiddush with the Shives that in Ramah, right, so Camp Ramah is known as Machaneh Ramah, right, but each age group is known as an Edah, right? I don't know if they took that from last week's Parsha or not, but, right, you know the word Edah because in its construct form, right, it's adat, right? So Adat Shalom, or if you want to use the Ashkenazi pronunciation, Adas Israel, right? Adat Shalom means congregation of peace, as opposed to Kehilat Shalom, which means community of peace. We should have sued them for copyright infringement. But there are other Kehilot Shalom as well. I often get email meant for other rabbis. But at any rate, right, so we know from the usage here that the spies were an Edah, a congregation, and this is the smallest group. I cannot attest to this myself, but our sages have combed through the Torah, and they have found no group smaller than this referred to as an Edah. Okay, so the smallest Edah is the 12 spies, right? The Edah Ra'ah, the evil congregation, and that's why a million is 12. Except it's not 12, right? Because two of the spies, Caleb and Joshua, were not evil, right? So therefore, the evil congregation is 10. So the smallest number of people that make up a congregation is 10. right? And I find it, frankly, fascinating that the whole idea of a minyan comes from bad people. It comes from bad people, right? And there's a Yiddish aphorism, right? 9 rabbis don't make a minyan. 10 horse thieves make a minyan, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a good person, a bad person. It only matters that you're a Jew, right? You could be a good person, a bad person. You could be learned. You could be ignorant, right? If you're a Jew and you're 13 or over, you're part of the minyan, right? And so here's what Maimonides says. The prayer of the community is always heard, and even if there were sinners among them in the minyan, the Holy One, blessed be He, never rejects the prayer of the multitude. Hence, a person must join himself with the community and should not pray by himself so long as he is able to pray with the community. And a person should always go to the synagogue morning and evening, for his prayer is only heard at all times in the synagogue. And whoever has a synagogue in his city and does not pray there with the community is called a bad neighbor. Okay, so we got a lot of bad neighbors in this neighborhood, frankly, right? I spoke a few weeks ago, you may remember, about anti-Zionist Jews who fail to recognize that to be a Jew is to be part of a people, part of a nation, right? It's not just about, your individual beliefs or your individual identity. And I have to tell you that all of that was like totally off the cuff. I did not plan to talk about that morning. It was not in my notes, but I don't know, for whatever reason, I was feeling pretty passionate. I don't know, maybe the Spirit of the Lord came upon me, and that's what I spoke about, right? But the need for a minyan emphasizes the communal aspect of Judaism, but it rubs against American societal trends, right? Especially among the societal sector in which the majority of American Jews find themselves, right? By which I mean college-educated, middle and upper middle class people, right? Where our whole society, right, emphasizes individuality, right? Individuality, right? And this is the logic. I don't know, again, some of you read the Jewish press more, some of you read it less. But you may know that last week, Hebrew Union College, which is the Reformed seminary and the seminary that I graduated from, although I'm obviously not Reformed anymore, and HUC had a rule until last week that if you were applying to the rabbinical school or the cantorial school and you were in a committed relationship with a non-Jew, you would not be admitted. Okay, and if you were already a cantorial student or a rabbinical student and you entered into a serious relationship with a non-Jew, you would not be eligible for ordination. Okay, and last week, they got rid of that rule. Okay, and so a rabbi who I know, I don't know him well, but I know him, Rabbi Mark David Cohen. He published an op-ed in the Times of Israel called The Anguished Dilemma of a Reformed Rabbi. This is what he writes. I recently came upon an expression used in a fundraising letter for the Union for Reform Judaism. Judaism your way. It's hard to imagine anything more antithetical to Judaism than Judaism your way. After all, it was in the first person plural that our ancestors stood at Sinai and said, "We will do and we will hear." Right? And I would add, I mean, you look at all our prayers, right? They're all in the plural, right? Rifa'enu Adonai v'nirafeh, right? Hear us, O Lord, and we shall be healed, right? Slach lanu, right? Forgive us. Al chet shehatanu lefanecha, right? For the sin which we have sinned against you, right? We benched Rosh Chodesh this morning, right? Ha-Chodesh hazeh haba aleinu l'tova, right? The new month which comes for us, for our community, as a blessing, right? It's all in the plural, right? I mean, there's an exception. The prayer at the end of the Amida, right? After you've spent 29 minutes praying silently for the Jews, you get 15 seconds to pray for yourself, right? And that's fair. That's a reasonable balance, right? So, right, to live Jewishly, Rabbi Cohen says, is to be engaged with the Jewish people. And then he goes on. Judaism your way, further demonstrated by HUC's decision regarding rabbinical students, causes me to worry about the future of liberal Judaism, placing the ultra-individualism of American society above the essence of Jewishness, right? And I have to say, and this goes back a long time, right? But if you, I think it's on Netflix, I think the TV series from the 90s, Northern Exposure, I think it's on Netflix, right? And here is really the litmus test, all right? There was an episode called Kaddish for Uncle Manny, okay? And Joel Fleischman, right, he's this Jewish doctor who's in this tiny village in Alaska because he's fulfilling an obligation that he had to the Alaska Health Department, which paid his way through medical school, right? But he's from New York, and he's very New York Jew, right? And his uncle Manny dies, and Fleischman didn't have a good relationship with his father. Uncle Manny was his surrogate father, and he wanted to say Kaddish, right? But he's the only Jew in the town, right? But the people love him. So they go on what they call a Jew hunt, and they try to round up Jews from all over Alaska and fly them in and pay them so that there can be a minyan and Fleischman can say Kaddish, right? But they only find 8 other Jews, so now there's 9 Jews, and there's obviously no Torah scroll in Sicily, right? So he can't say Kaddish. And finally, Fleischman decides that it's all about being part of a community, right? And the people of Sicily, Alaska, who love him and whom he loves, they're his real community. So send these, Jews for hire, send them back wherever they came from, and I'm going to say Kaddish with my community, okay? And here is a litmus test, okay? If you found that moving, in my opinion, that's a problem, okay? If you said, you know what, this is nice. It's nice. It's nice that they love him, he loves them. It's nice that they make a community, but that's not Judaism. That's not Judaism, right? you have to have a minyan to say Kaddish. You have to have a minyan to say, and when people say to me, well, can I say Kaddish on my own? It's a schlep for me to come to. Look, I'm not the God come, right? I am not going to come to your home to stop you from saying Kaddish by yourself without a minyan, right? Not, right? But, in other words, it's not my job to make sure you follow the rules. It's my job to accurately tell you what the rules are, right? And tradition says you say Kaddish with a minyan. Right, if you find it personally meaningful to try, then I'm not going to stop you. But that's not what tradition says you should do, right? And, but that's the individual. I mean, it's rife in the Reform movement, but the conservative movement is hardly free from that either, right? People want to do what they want to do, right? And we got to live with it, right? I mean, nobody's going to prevent people from doing what they find meaningful, right? But here's the thing, right? I totally value and appreciate our members who are married to non-Jews. I absolutely value and appreciate them, and I value and appreciate their spouses, and I value and appreciate all their contributions to our community, right? But to be a rabbi or to be a cantor, to me that's different, right? To me that's different, okay? We still have expectations in conservative Judaism for our rabbis and cantors. Now, I mean, there's a diversity, right? There are different standards of kashrut, right? I mean, some conservative rabbis will eat fish or vegetarian food in a non-kosher restaurant, and some won't, right? There's different standards for Shabbat observance, right? And some rabbis and cantors drive to shul, others won't, right? Some rabbis and cantors will flip a light on Shabbat or restart the Zoom if it goes off, right? And others won't. Okay, and we have a diversity of opinion, right? But if you are applying to a conservative rabbinical or cantori school and you don't observe Shabbat at all, right? And you don't keep kosher at all, right? They won't accept you, right? And if you somehow manage to sneak by the admissions committee, right, they won't ordain you, right? And I totally agree with that policy, right? And I acknowledge, right, balancing the community and the individual is a challenge, right? And it's a big challenge, right? And the pandemic showed that, right? I mean, I know a conservative rabbi whose sense of Shabbat observance, he did not permit his congregation to have streaming or Zoom services on Shabbat or Yom Tov, right? At the height of the pandemic when nobody was going anywhere. He said, no, just pray at home. Just pray at home, right? And he would not allow his congregation to do Zoom on Shabbat at all. And he's not the rabbi of that congregation anymore, okay? And I mean, somebody I know, I feel badly for him, I do, but to me, he did not balance correctly his own need for Shabbat observance and what was good for the community, right? But that is a difficult, it's a difficult balance, right? It's a difficult balance. And the Reform movement, right, from within their own internal logic, what they did makes sense for them, right? Just like in 1983, when they said that a child who has one Jewish parent, whether father or mother, could be considered Jewish without conversion or whatever, right? And that makes sense for them, right? But the problem is, right, we're not only a machane, we're also still an Edom, right? And there have been cases, you know, where there was a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, and there are people in the extended family, right, who were raised as Jews, consider themselves Jews, have a Jewish father, not a Jewish mother, never converted. Rabbi, can they still have an aliyah? One case, Rabbi, can they read from the Torah? And, you know, my response is always, I wish you hadn't told me that, right? I wish you hadn't told me that, right? Because again, I'm not the God cop, and I'm not Inspector Klusovsky, right? I mean, you know, you tell me who you're giving aliyahs to, that's fine. I assume, right? I don't, but, you know, now that you've told me that they're not Jewish by our standards, it's a problem, right? And to me, again, that total lack of consideration for the fact that different streams of Judaism interact, right? And people can be raised Reform, become conservative, raised Reform, become Orthodox, right? And so, to me, there needs to be greater concern for the whole community and not just A, what works for you as an individual, and B, what works for your movement without greater consideration for all of Klal Yisrael, all of the Jewish people. Anyway, that's my thought. You can agree or disagree, I suppose, but that's where I stand on this. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Okay. We continue with the Kaddish before Musaf, page 155 or 428, and then we'll say the first two pages of